Imagine a city where the fog is so thick you cannot see your own hand in front of your face. In the autumn of 1888, this was the reality of London's East End, a place where a faceless monster was about to rewrite the history of crime. He didn't just kill, he vanished into thin air, leaving a trail of surgical butchery that terrified a queen and stumped the world's greatest detectives. For over a century, his identity has remained the ultimate cold case, a ghost story that refuses to die.
Tonight, we enter the smog of Whitechapel to hunt the man they called Jack the Ripper.
Whitechapel in 1888 was a labyrinth of human misery, a square mile of filth where 80,000 people struggled to survive. In this desperate landscape, life was cheap, and the shadows were deep enough to hide any sin. For the women of the district, the streets were a workplace of last resort, a dangerous gamble for a few pennies to pay for a night's lodging. The air was a toxic mix of coal smoke and the stench of nearby slaughterhouses, creating a grim atmosphere where violence was common. But among the thousands of ordinary criminals, a predator of a different species was waiting for his moment to strike.
The terror officially began in the pre-dawn darkness of August 31st on a lonely stretch of road known as Buck's Row. Mary Ann Nichols, a mother of 5 struggling with poverty, became the first canonical victim of a killer whose name was not yet known. Her body was discovered by 2 passing cartmen, but even the seasoned police officers who arrived were horrified by what they saw. This was no common street robbery. The precision of the wounds suggested a killer with a cold heart and a sharp blade. The autumn of terror had begun, and the East End would never sleep soundly again. Just 8 days later, the violence escalated with the discovery of Annie Chapman in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. This murder was significantly more gruesome, suggesting that the killer was becoming bolder and more depraved with every strike. He had operated in near total silence, just feet away from sleeping residents, before vanishing back into the morning mist. When the details of the surgical mutilations were leaked, a wave of pure panic swept through London. The realization hit the public like a physical blow. There was a methodical, surgical monster walking among them.
As the body count rose, the Victorian press realized that blood and mystery were a profitable commodity. Newspapers like The Star and the Illustrated Police News turned the grim reality of the East End into a macabre form of entertainment for the masses. Every edition sold out within minutes, fueled by lurid sketches of a man in a long coat and top hat. This media frenzy created a feedback loop where the police were paralyzed by public pressure and the killer was emboldened by his global fame. Suddenly, the entire world was watching Whitechapel, and the Ripper was the star of a horrific new drama. On the night of September 30th, the killer's ambition reached a terrifying peak in what would become known as the double event. Elizabeth Stride was the first victim found that night, her body still warm, suggesting the killer had been interrupted mid-act. Not satisfied with his work, he moved deeper into the city's heart to find a second target within the hour. The body of Catherine Eddowes was found in Mitre Square, mutilated with a level of ferocity that shocked even the most veteran investigators. The Ripper had successfully evaded the police patrols twice in one night, proving he was a master of the city's secret passages. In the wake of the double murder, the police discovered the only physical clue the Ripper would ever leave behind, a chalk message on a wall in Goulston Street. The cryptic message read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing," sparking a massive internal debate at Scotland Yard. Fearing a racial riot in the tense East End,
Commissioner Charles Warren ordered the message to be erased before it could be photographed. This decision remains one of the most controversial moments in the history of the case, as it potentially destroyed the only direct link to the killer's mind. Was it a genuine clue, or a clever red herring designed to incite chaos and distract the law? While the police struggled with physical evidence, the killer allegedly decided to introduce himself to the world through the post. A letter arrived at the Central News Agency, written in red ink, taunting the authorities and promising more funny little games. It was signed with a name that would haunt the collective human consciousness for centuries: Jack the Ripper. Although many modern historians believe the letter was a hoax written by a cynical journalist, it gave the faceless ghost a terrifying identity. From that moment on, he wasn't just a murderer, he was Jack, a brand of evil that seemed to possess a supernatural ability to haunt the streets. The pressure on Scotland Yard became unbearable as Queen Victoria herself expressed her outrage at the lack of progress. The police were using every tool available, including undercover officers dressed as women and the early use of bloodhounds, but they remained consistently one step behind. Vigilante committees began to form, with local men patrolling the streets with clubs and whistles, often causing more confusion than help. The atmosphere in London was one of total siege, where every stranger was a suspect and every shadow was a threat. The government's inability to catch a single man in a city of millions was becoming a national embarrassment and a political crisis. The horror reached its absolute zenith on November 9th, in a small rented room at Miller's Court. Mary Jane Pelly, the youngest of the victims, was found murdered in her own bed in a scene that looked like a vision of hell. Because he was indoors and had hours of privacy, the Ripper performed his most extensive and horrific mutilations yet. The crime scene was so devastating that the police surgeon reportedly couldn't look at the bed for more than a few seconds. It was the final, definitive act of a monster who had completely abandoned his humanity for a night of pure slaughter.
Over the decades, the list of suspects has grown to include over 100 names, ranging from the plausible to the completely absurd. Some point to Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber with a history of mental illness, while others favor Montague Druitt, a barrister who vanished shortly after the final murder. More exotic theories suggest a high-level conspiracy involving the royal family's physician intended to cover up a scandalous secret. Despite modern DNA testing on the few surviving artifacts, no theory has ever been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The Ripper's true identity remains locked in the Victorian era, a secret he took with him to an unmarked grave. As suddenly as the terror had begun, the killings simply stopped after the death of Mary Jane Kelly. There was no grand arrest, no dramatic confession, and no final showdown in the streets of London. The Ripper simply vanished back into the gray smog of history, leaving the police and the public in a state of permanent suspense. Theories abound as to why he stopped. Perhaps he died, was committed to an asylum, or simply left the country for new hunting grounds. This silence was perhaps his greatest weapon, as it ensured that his story would never have a satisfying conclusion. The hunt for Jack the Ripper was a failure for the police of 1888, but it became the catalyst for the birth of modern criminology. The case forced Scotland Yard to modernize, leading to the development of criminal profiling and more rigorous crime scene preservation. It also shone a harsh light on the horrific living conditions of the poor, eventually sparking social reforms that would dismantle the slums of Whitechapel. The Ripper intended to destroy lives, but he inadvertently forced a society to look at its own failings and change for the better. The blood spilled in those alleys eventually paid for the progress of the 20th century.
Today, Jack the Ripper is more than just a historical figure. He is a permanent fixture in our global imagination. From Hollywood films to Ripperology conventions, the mystery continues to fascinate and repel us in equal measure. We are drawn to the case because it represents the ultimate unsolved puzzle, a dark reflection of our own obsession with the macabre. Every year, thousands of tourists walk the same cobblestones looking for a trace of a man who has been dead for over a century. The hunt for the Ripper has never truly ended. It has simply moved from the streets into the history books. As the shadows grow long in the streets of modern London, the ghost of 1888 still lingers in the corners of our minds. We may never know his name or his face, but we will never forget the terror he inspired in the heart of the world's greatest empire. Perhaps the Ripper's greatest trick wasn't his ability to kill, but his ability to remain a mystery forever. But what do you think? Was he a doctor, a madman, or someone we've never even heard of? Leave your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's darkest corners.